the Planning Committee for today, the 28th of November. This is the last Planning Committee meeting for this year of 2017. Welcome to all the members, members of the public and media that are following us, and formally open the meeting. Members, I'll just go through the agenda. Firstly, apologies. Councillor Casey for absence, Councillor Cooper and Collins for lateness, Councillor Hills on council business, and also Councillor Sayers on council business. Councillor Simpson, lateness on council business. Councillor Clow, early departure. Thank you for registering the early departure.
I'll move those. Move
those. Councillor Philip Pinder, do I have a second? I will then. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Declare those that carried. No declarations of interest. Are there any further on any item, members? There being none, we'll move past to the confirmation of minutes, and I'll so move.
Happy to second.
Confirmation, 7 November. Thank you, Councillor Walker. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. There are no petitions, so that takes us to public input. There has been one request, that's been deferred at the request was request, and that's the Public Transport Users Association regarding trains to Huapai, and we'll hear that now in February. Local board input, none has been requested, though boards have been made aware of items on the agenda. For example, the endorsement of the the Manurewa Takanini Papakura Integrated Area Plan. There is no local board input. Extraordinary items, there are none. There are no notices of motion, which takes us to the first item of business, which is item 9, approval of the draft Auckland Plan for consultation. And we have reporting for us Denise O'Shannessy, Manager of Strategic Advice, and Jacques Victor, who's the GM of the Auckland Plan Strategy and Research. And that item, members, is on page 9. There is a lot of material. We had to include it on the agenda because we are signing it off today for consultation. I will so move the recommendations A, B. There is an addition. Do I have a second in the absence of the Mayor? Deputy Mayor, would you like to second that? And I should have recorded that the Mayor is an apology, I think, for lateness. Can we record that, please, on council business? He's tied up in a meeting. So I will move, and the Deputy Mayor will. Oh, sorry, apology. The Mayor is with us. And there is an additional F, and we'll discuss that shortly. I'll hand now to Jacques Victor and Denise O'Shannessy.
Good morning, councillors. Today we have gotten to a particular point in the process of the Auckland Plan. We've all done quite a bit of work on it, and so here we are today to adopt a draft plan. I'm going to hand over to Denise in a second just to highlight a few of the key issues in the report. I just first of all wanted to say thank you very much to all the councillors and all the local board members who sat through many workshops, did the hard slog, gave us lots of direction in those workshops. Thank you very much for that. And I also need to thank all the people in the organisations that we worked with, and there were many of those throughout the process. They gave freely of their time and of their knowledge and all kinds of information, and they really helped us to get the plan where it is today. So just wanted to make sure that we thank them. It all came free, and so yeah. I will hand over to Denise. Just a few highlights.
Good morning. The purpose of today is to seek approval of the draft Auckland Plan for public consultation. As already noted in the report and in previous reports that we've brought to you, there's been significant engagement with stakeholders and partners throughout the preparation of this draft plan during 2017. There have also been a number of workshops with the Planning Committee where direction has been given and feedback sought. There have been 5 main series of workshops, noting that the number of workshops in each series was due to the need to cover off the same material for each outcome in the development strategy. So during February and March, there were 4 workshops setting the scene for the refresh, providing the rationale for the programme of work. In April, there were 4 workshops introducing the development strategies and the themes and setting out the broad strategic approach for discussion. During June to August, there were a further 6 workshops, and these provided feedback on the first round of engagement and proposed strategic directions and focus areas for each outcome. They also discussed urban areas that would form part of the development strategy. In September, October, there are a further 5 workshops where the draft content was provided for each outcome area and the development strategy. We also discussed the measurement framework and possible measures and the broad range of contextual information which supports the plan. That was also the opportunity to have a first look at the prototype for the digital plan. The final workshop in November provided a further opportunity to comment on the draft plan content and consider appropriate consultation topics. So that was the 5 series of workshops that have been held throughout the year, planning committee workshops, which were also attended by local board chairs and representatives. The draft plan we're putting in front of you today incorporates 6 outcomes and the development strategy, which combined will help us to address the big challenges and opportunities facing Aucklanders over the next 30 years. We're asking you to approve text and maps. There are graphics that will be developed as part of the creation of the website, and we're asking the subgroup that's delegated to sign off these visual elements as we work through those over the next couple of months. The draft plan is contained in attachments B and C, so that's the text and the maps. There's also an attachment A which provides a summary of the key essence of each outcome in the development strategy, but it's not part of the Auckland plan as such, so the key attachments are B and C. The attachment C contains the maps that are required to visually illustrate how Auckland may develop in the future, and many of these are legislative requirements. So they're a key component of the Auckland plan. They're just in separate attachments, just for manageability, really. The text in attachment P and B provides links to the relevant maps throughout. Attachment D is an overview document that will be used to support consultation. So it's simply a summary of the plan, and that will be translated into 5 languages plus easy read. Important point to note is that the digital Auckland plan will be the main platform for engagement. Development of that digital plan has already commenced, and once approved, the content that sits in attachments B and C today will be used to finish the build of the website. So we have to ask you to sign it off in the printed document form, and that means that a lot of that contextual information is placed at the front of the document and at the back of the document, but in reality that will be most of that will be accessible from the landing page. There's also a range of supporting information which provides a bit more detail, and that's accessed via click-through from relevant content in the plan. The digital plan's strength is its ability to easily connect to other relevant content across the plan and to enable more detail, or in the case of the maps, different views that help to provide greater understanding. So you'll note throughout the document yellow highlights, which is where we're actually in the website we'll be linking to other information. A joint 10-year budget and Auckland plan consultation was agreed by the Planning Committee in March, and planning is underway for this, and a joint consultation document will be brought to the governing body on 7th of February, so that will include the Auckland plan and the 10-year budget. Formal consultation will run from 28th of February to 28th of March. Following that, feedback will be considered and recommendations presented to the committee during 2 workshops on the 3rd and 10th of May, and the final plan will be reported to the committee on the 5th of June.
Thank you, Denise. Denise, there's just one part, if you could explain the F, please.
Yes, so that was an additional recommendation to take account of any joint work with government which may take place between now and the consultation, between now and the end of the consultation period, so that we can make additions to the draft plan so that it's visible to people making submissions that there is some other work going on which may need to be incorporated into the final plan.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Denise, you've outlined the process. We've gone through numerous workshops and meetings on this, engaging local boards, Independent Māori Statutory Board, key stakeholders, numerous. And can you just outline at our last workshop, which I think was last week, I'm trying to, you invited at that workshop last strands of feedback, and you did receive feedback from both councillors that were present. There was a follow-up email inviting all councillors to provide further information. Can you just give us an account of that briefly as you received it? You also received some input as invited from local board chairs or their appointees. Can you run through that? I think that was signalled as the final opportunity to provide feedback.
That's correct. So we did have feedback from some councillors and local board members. Are you wanting me to run through the detail of that feedback?
Look, just very, very
Sure.
briefly.
So we had feedback from Angela Full-James, Franklin Local Board. She was asking for some additional words around the highly productive soils. She also had a request for information to be added around the train station at Pairata and Drury. That was the main, I think that were the main points in her feedback. Councillor Casey had a range of feedback around incorporating text on the living wage, innovation and cheaper housing, increase in state and council-owned housing, and she also talked about innovation and models for provision of housing for older people. She wanted to see some text around legislative requirements to register boarding houses, and also wanted to incorporate something around defensive architecture, so putting some comment in around inclusive architecture in the plan. We were able to address all of those points. She also wanted to see advocacy for a national strategy to end homelessness in New Zealand, and we didn't feel that we could really include that in a national strategy in the Auckland document.
Okay, thank you.
The Waitemata Local Board had a number of pieces of feedback. We were able to respond to most of those, although they did want to see they did want to see something more on the plan around the 4 wellbeings, and we responded that we felt that that was addressed through the integrated nature of the plan, which in fact addresses all of those wellbeings. They had comments around wanting to see a target around the number of road deaths in New Zealand, and we responded that the committee had decided not to include targets in the plan, but we had measures around that, and that was a focus area in the transport and access outcome. They similarly had a point around a target for net zero emissions by 2050. They had made several points around the need to include emphasis on public health, including alcohol harm, and we have actually addressed those in the latest draft.
Thank you. And mine, on behalf of myself and Councillor Hills, was a little bit late, but I've had clarification from Jacques on the nodes, and I withdraw what I was proposing anyway. So, look, that's good. I think we've interrogated this well over many, many months, from February this year right through to now, end of November. I think it's some 22 planning committee workshops all up, 9 planning committee business meetings. It's gone out to local boards with full reports on 2 occasions to draw feedback. It's been a long haul, members. I want to thank you, Denise, Jacques, leading up your teams, and all the people who are contributing to you being here in support of us. Thank you very much. So, members, are there any key questions that you would like to ask now? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd also like to thank the team sitting here, but also the people behind who have been involved deeply in this process, even if some of them wear Welsh supporters or Lions supporters shirts, but we'll forgive them for that. Jacques, or Denise maybe, because we were talking about this, so the work with the government, and the point about the homelessness is a very valid one, where we perhaps do need a nationwide strategy or plan. So could you give us some more in-depth understanding, please, how the work with the government has been with building this plan and where we've landed more recently about their role, bearing particularly in mind F?
It would be fair to, so we work with central government officers last year and all of this year, but it would be fair to say that the new government has not had the opportunity to give direct input. And so in that sense, that's why number F is there. They need to have that opportunity. They have written a letter to the mayor expressing their desire to work with council, in particular on transport issues, so around ATAP, and then also around the development strategy. And then we happened to have a discussion with central government, senior central government officers this morning. And what can be done is between now and the end of March, we can address those issues, work through all the different work streams and the different issues, and then hopefully central government's view can be part of input to the draft plan, and it can be sorted in that way for the final plan. What number F really is about is, I think it is just fair to give the public a heads up that that work needs to be done, so that they know that central government will have input, and there might be things that change, just as they will have input. So that's really, in essence.
Are there any particular areas of potential difference that you are seeing, either Denise or Jacques?
Yes and no. Yes, as in I am not sure exactly what government's position might be on all of the issues, but no, in the sense that we have looked through government statements and the policies and through the election, and in that sense things really line up very well. For example, if you look at transport, government wants to put a strong emphasis on public transport, walking and cycling. That has come through really strongly in the plan. So I think a lot of those things will line up very well. When it comes to, I suppose, where some of the bigger differences might be is around particular projects. The large infrastructure projects and to some degree possibly more so the timing of those and how we sequence them. And that of course then has a flow-on effect in terms of the timing of release of the servicing of development areas. So I think it's probably in terms of the sequencing and the rollout of infrastructure where there might be some adjustment, and that's fair enough, we'll work through that. It really affects two tables in the development strategy. So the one table is around the big bulk infrastructure, and the phasing of that, and the second table is then the development areas and the phasing of that. That's both urban and future urban. And those are probably, one would imagine, not speaking on behalf of government, but one would imagine those are the two essential bits of the development strategy that would. But because we did not, because the plan does not go into great detail in how you do things and what exactly it is, it sets the basic framework. It is quite flexible in that sense. Then, as long as there is alignment in terms of the basic framework, yeah, it's really just those two tables that would be affected mostly, I think.
Okay, well, we'll see how it plays out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And there was one area of input that I didn't reference, and that was the comprehensive contribution of the Independent Māori Statutory Board. They made quite detailed submission in the last couple of weeks, and the board has received a reply in my name on behalf of the committee, and I thank the board members here for the Independent Māori Statutory Board and their extremely comprehensive feedback. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, got a couple of questions, and they essentially go to the links in the document. I guess the first question is around the link between the Auckland plan and the long-term plan, and I guess the general context, Mr. Chair, is quite obviously many of the things that go to the Auckland plan are going to need budget. So there's a very close link between the Auckland plan and the long-term plan. So my question that goes to this is, are there going to be links between parts of the Auckland plan and the long-term plan that we're going out for consultation, so that somebody that might be approaching from the budgetary perspective can reference the Auckland plan and vice versa?
Because the two plans are being consulted on at the same time, that does make it a lot easier. So people will have the information on both plans in front of them at the same time. That's the first point. There is specific reference in the Auckland plan to the the main infrastructure, so those projects, and it makes it very clear that when a project is in the Auckland plan, that does not guarantee its funding through any other plan. So of course that does not just include Auckland Council's LTP, but it also includes the long-term plans of other infrastructure providers. So let's say through the RLTP, for example. The Auckland plan specifically references that and acknowledges that those are separate processes, and that is where the confirmation of funding comes through. But yes, I think with the two processes, so in the case of Auckland Council, with the two processes running together and being consulted on together, that makes it really visible for people how they link.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I understand the visibility. Specifically what I'm asking about is a link. So, for example, in the part of the Auckland plan that goes to environment, will there be a link from the environment section of the Auckland plan with the environment budget in the long-term plan? And similarly, we could be talking about some other component. So my question is not necessarily around links, multitudinous links, but at least a broad link to the section of the long-term plan that marries up. Is that possible?
We'll have to look into it. So at the moment there isn't that direct link, but that certainly is something we can look at. I suppose the one difference is the Auckland plan is a digital plan. The LTP is not a digital plan. So we'll just have to find a way how one could do that. So you probably can't link from the one plan electronically to the next, but we can do something where we can actually show and direct people to specific parts in the LTP. I'm sure we can have a look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's really important, and it's important for us to make it as easy as possible, and we should be able to do that. Yeah. The other question I've got just goes to other links. Are you going to be adding more links than what you have now? For example, I don't see a link to the State of the Hauraki Golf Report, for example, which is very useful. Similarly, there are other things like the Norwest Wild Link, high-level plans or reports that we've got. Are they going to be added as opportunities arise?
Absolutely. That's one of the beauties about having the digital plan, is that we can actually link those things as they come along. So yeah, they're not all there today, but yeah, the idea is as relevant things come along, we can actually link them. So they won't be part of the Auckland plan. That's not what you're suggesting, I get. But yeah, we'll put as many in as that makes sense as they come along.
I think to add to that, I think you recall in the workshop we described how the digital plan would be, and there were links to a range of things. A lot of the other things at the moment are in PDF format or whatever, so for now it'll link to an accrued link, but as those documents refresh they will digitise as well, and those links over the next, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years will get very sound, and this will become a suite that will refresh and be digitised.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to echo your acknowledgement of the team who've done extraordinary work to pull this together. The only problem with a year of meetings and workshops, you kind of forget some of the stuff that you've put in, or I do anyway. So I know that we were clear that we weren't going to get too carried away with detail and targets and that kind of thing, but I know that we discussed some direction around sport and rec and art and culture, and I just can't remember where that discussion got to, because there isn't anything that I can see in here.
Jack, on that, we did discuss that at a workshop probably 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Sorry, I realised that was why I was away.
All good. Where that landed in the end, there was so sport and rec, or there was also health and well-being generally. Where it landed that they are not particular outcomes, they're only the 6 outcomes, but they got woven into the outcomes as a way of how you would achieve some of those outcomes. So you will find and we made some significant changes in terms of health and well-being, which included, for example, physical activity, the sport side of things. You will see a lot of that in belonging. Some of that comes through in homes and places. Some of that comes through in transport. So they've actually been woven into the other outcomes. At one of the sessions we had with some of the external people that we engage with, one of from the health board, I cannot remember the person's name for the life of me right now, but she made the comment that she thought it was extremely well done, and how in weaving it into the outcomes, it actually addressed the fundamentals rather than some of the symptoms. And so, for example, in the transport and homes and places, it talks about the networks and the things that enable people to get for physical activity. And they thought it was really well done in that, it addressed those fundamentals. But so belonging, homes and places, and access, and transport and access, those are the key ones you'll find it.
Okay. And from the art and culture perspective?
So belonging, it comes through there as a way in how you create inclusion and how you create a way of people expressing their. You also find some of that again in homes and places and even in transport, and how that is a way when we do different projects, when we create places, how you can play that out through arts and culture and as an expression of local identity or whatever that is.
Okay, no, that's useful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, we all know no matter how evolved we might get in our processes, if it's not in here, it becomes a very good barrier to not putting it in the LTP or our budgets. So as long as we can find reference, then that's important. I just want to acknowledge the strengthening of the environmental sector. I think section. I think it's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoss. Mayor Goff.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the question that the Deputy Mayor raised about homelessness, just to indicate that I've organised a meeting with the Minister of Social Development and the Minister for Housing and Construction with the NGOs involved in Housing First before Christmas. And what we're looking at doing in that area is building on the initiative we started with Amy Adams with Housing First, but trying to do it at a greater scale. So we've so far housed 237 people, including children that were homeless. The NGOs would love to raise that to about 1,900, which would really start to impact at that level. So it's about whether, I think the government is aligned in intention. It's always a question of what resources we've got. But also to pick up, Jacques, on your point about the alignment, I think there is good alignment in a range of different areas, particularly with affordable housing and social housing and the greater impact. And obviously F on our recommendations is going to draw that in so that we can take on board the goal of Kiwi Build to build 5,000 affordable houses a year in Auckland, and the goal of building 1,000 extra state houses a year. And likewise with ATAP, Jacques, which I think you mentioned, we'll be trying to get that into alignment as quickly as possible. We'll know the outcome of that probably in about 3 months' time. So it comes late in the consultation process, but we can still allude to it as the new government evolves its policies. So I just thought I'd make those points to bring you up to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. Well, members, this brings us to the probably the penultimate act, because the ultimate act is actually when we confirm it next year. But I again want to...
Mr. Point of order, or for clarification, Mr. Are we still
Councillor
on questions, or have we moved on?
I'm happy to take your question, Councillor
No,
Cripps.
I don't want to ask a question. I want to make I just want to
Okay, we'll
make
move
comments.
into... You can make a comment shortly. And we'll put your name here, Councillor Craigs. Thank you. So this is some huge work here. It's taken up immense resource from the Auckland Council organisation, Jacques' team, Denise's team. And I know a lot of you are here today, or actually it's only just a trickle of you are here today, because there's huge teams sitting behind this work. And I think on behalf of all the councils, Mayor and all the councillors and the IMSB members who are part of this committee, we wish you huge gratitude for the contribution you've made here. This is an enormous task. It sets out our vision for Auckland, and it's a grand vision for Auckland, and it's a vision for a future that's dynamic and changing almost by the day. So this is the way we share that vision with Aucklanders, and not just Aucklanders, but those in Wellington as well, mana whenua here in Auckland, and our key partners and stakeholders, but most importantly, all the people that reside in Auckland and that interact with Auckland. And not forgetting that last category as well, because that is quite a considerable category. It's a 30-year outlook, and it's required by statute. We're one of the few local government organisations that is required to look out so far. Others are required to undertake 10-year budgets as a minimum. The difference here this time is we are looking at a digital document as opposed to the good old solid printed coffee book. That digital document is some of the questions that have been raised here today about what can we link to. That's what you can do. What's one of the benefits of the dynamic digital document as opposed to that print once printed version, which just stays the same. So over the next 6 years, until this is reviewed by a future council, it can be updated with new data that's coming through. It's more spatial, and it is definitely more streamlined. And I think being more streamlined, it is more legible, readable, and it can be grabbed by Aucklanders, and particularly by our own staff and those that might need to call upon this document to guide their work. I think it is a lot more accessible, this particular way that we are doing it. It addresses all the big key issues, and it follows the 6 key outcome areas with a development strategy. They are the key parts of this plan to read if you are considering this work before us now. And that development strategy is likely to change, and I will come to that. It shows us not just where Auckland is going to grow, but also how Auckland is going to grow over the next 30 years. And it provides some certainty that will be then further reinforced by our other strategic and delivery plans. And of course, it does respond to the national policy statements that now guide us as well. So this document, members, is for all of Auckland. We've heard about that before. It's for central government, the private sector. It's for the utility providers, for example. It's for all of our people, including mana whenua. And again, I'm really very grateful for the quite demanding time that has been allocated by councillors. There have been quite regular attendees, and we remember you, everybody. Local board chairs and their appointees at all those workshops and meetings, and IMS, Independent Māori Statutory Board participation and huge contributions as well. We do need to sign off this now, and is it perfect? I would say no, it's not a perfect document, otherwise we'd be just adopting it now. But it is well on the way to being perfect. I like to use the term that it's sort of 85% polished, and we'll get it up to that 100% mark after we've received community input and we confirm it worthy of enduring the next period of 6 years before it's reviewed early next year. So we're going to confirm today also the overview of the plan and the approach to consultation. We won't be signing off on the images here today. There is a little bit of work to be done by the staff to finalise the images. Lastly, and the Deputy Mayor alluded to this, we have a new government of only just 1 month. That government has hardly had a chance to put its feet under the table and get its officials to look at our work. That's understandable. It's very early in its days, but we know that the government has conveyed to us a deep interest in the Auckland plan. I'm expecting to see some significant contributions coming through from government in the new year once it's landed, say for example, its government policy statement on transport. They have already signalled strong interest in reinforcing public transport and active transport in Auckland. They've also signalled an early updating of the Auckland Transport Alignment Project. They've also signalled just recently an interest in developing an urban development strategy. So all good things, big focus from the government on public transport, housing, urban regeneration, and that is all reflected in our Auckland plan. So we'll see some further refinements and final adoption of this in the coming year of 2018. I want to end where I began, and that is, please, Jacques, Denise, take our appreciation back to all your teams. This has been an immense year for your people on behalf of us, so thank you. Member Ngamati.
Oh, kia ora. Ngā mihi. I just wanted to firstly acknowledge your response, Mr. Chair, to the board's advice that we did receive last Friday. And you also know that we acknowledged both Jack and Denise's team in the professional and collaborative approach that they've worked with the IMSB. We think that this has been an example, at least in terms of the relationship between the IMSB and Council, a really good working relationship where we made solid progress on those matters that were certainly of interest to us, and so we commend you, Council, and Jacques and Denise and your team on that. When we do, of course, look forward to some ongoing work in relation to the Auckland plan and long-term plan measures and how they all connect. When we embarked on becoming involved in the Auckland plan, we had a few drivers that we wanted to achieve. Of course, our role is to advise and monitor Council's work, and in the context of this, the Auckland plan refresh. And we wanted to ensure that the board's issues of significance document, the Māori plan, Māori values and interests strongly informed the Council's work streams in the plan, and at this point in time we're satisfied that we've kind of dealt to that. We wanted to ensure that when talking about Māori wellbeing and the contribution of Māori in Tāmaki Makaurau, that it was informed by the best data and evidence, and we're feeling confident that that has been the case. We were wanting to ensure that throughout the document that the Treaty of Waitangi and the Treaty of Waitangi principles and its variant applications were infused into the Auckland plan, and we believe they have been. We strongly sought a Māori the retention of the whole concept of the Māori identity being the point of difference in the world, Auckland's identity. And we're very pleased to see that that's found its way through from the previous plan into the new. And really those good things that were in the previous plan from our perspective have been built into the current refresh. And we also wanted to make sure that in the engagement process that you were taking on board Māori views, Māori plans, and actively engaging with mana whenua and mātāwaka, noting that today is about approving it for consultation, so there's going to be more opportunities. But, you know, we commend that part of the process too. So really, in summary, the IMSB commend the plan, support the plan to be released for public consultation, and we look forward to ongoing engagement on it to continue to improve it to its end point. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Namali, and thank you to the IMSB. Councillor Mike Lee.
No questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Just have another question about links. Given that the Auckland plan is a plan for Auckland, is it possible to have links to organisations that may have a relationship? For example, if we look at homelessness, Auckland City Mission, if we look at the environment, there are organisations across that space and so on, so that the Auckland plan becomes a little bit more dynamic.
Again, absolutely. Denise just reminded me, you will see some of those links are already in the implementation section. It jumps to some of those other organisations and their sites. As we build the site, we can put more of those in. We are really at the beginning of building the site, so
Okay.
but yeah, some of it already in the implementation section.
Councillor Quicks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I haven't been able to take part in as many of the workshops on this as I would want, but I do want to make some comments on it and acknowledge much of the work, the valuable work that's gone into it. I'm sort of interested in the whole issue of affordable housing, and I think for the first time we've actually seen an acknowledgement that of the problem of unaffordable housing in Auckland. Auckland is now one of the most unaffordable cities in the world, and this report actually acknowledges the social impact of that and the role that the council has played in that, the negative social impact on Maori in particular, and so I want to acknowledge that we've put up our hand and say we've played a role in this. But like the major political parties, we haven't actually said, look, this is what we're going to do, this is the big bang way that we're going to get through this. The last government tinkered around this, the special housing areas really, while they acknowledged the problem, really didn't have any impact at all. The problem has just got worse over the period from 2008 to the end of this government, and the only big bang solution that I've seen that's being put out there is now being put out by the Labour Party and Phil Twyford. And I want to acknowledge that at least he's come up with a plan that actually addresses the shortage of land the scarcity, the artificial scarcity of land. And so I want to acknowledge publicly the work that's being done by the Labor Party and by Phil Twyford on actually trying to break through this problem.
Thank you. And just on that note too, just remember that when this new council came in, one of the first things that the Mayor convened was the Mayoral Housing Task Force, and that has a set of 33 recommendations, Mr Mayor, 33 recommendations?
33.
33. So it's been top of mind for this council, and I think there's another Mayoral Housing Task Force working group meeting next week to further action those recommendations. But you are right. It's good to hear the incoming Labour New Zealand First coalition government with Greens and Competence and Supply focusing on housing, and I think you are right, Councillor Quacks. I think in tandem, government and this council, we can create some real and meaningful change to the housing crisis in Auckland. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Final comment, Councillor Filipaina?
Not a comment, sorry, Chair. It's just in regards to the recommendations. Is that okay?
Question?
Yep, question around F. I agree with thee in regards to any changes, but you've got there that to make any additions, but it'll be post-public consultation. So are there any, so if there are any issues or statements made or changes within the government that you have the consultation, and having it post-public consultation seems a bit weird for me. So is this not post, but it's not? Oh, that's right. I just wanted to sort of get clarification around that. I agree with thee, but not after we've got all the information back and then we're going to put something in there. That's all.
We'll just clarify that, because I was looking at that myself, and we were, I had a recommendation this morning, and it was just a bit long, and I was trying to edit it down. Now, I may have edited it down and created a little bit of a problem and some lack of clarity, which you're picking up on, which I appreciate. So,
Chair, just clarification. So, if the government, through the Auckland Plan process and prior to going out to the public, if there are any significant changes, are we saying with F that it gets delegated? And I'm fine with E.
We'll go to the question.
Yeah,
and
please.
I think they've got the question.
Does that go and get delegated instead of coming through to the whole committee, depending on the significance of any decisions while you talk to the government?
We'll have the answer from Jacques.
Thank you.
Yeah, the point of F is, you're right, it doesn't read right. The notation, I'm going to call it, needs to go into this draft document and into the summary document to give the public notice that the new government will be part of the process and there might be some changes flowing from that. So yeah, it's not the post-public consultation needs to sit earlier in the sentence. The change must go in now.
Does the word post-public consultation need to be there at all?
Perhaps not.
No.
I think because we're talking about this interim period. Yeah. We've got a new government in place. We've got officials not yet being briefed by their ministers and cabinet, and that's just because of the timing. So I think if we take out the words post-public consultation, Jacques, that.
Yep, and maybe just be clear that the additions are to the draft plan and to the overview document. I think we need to do it in both.
Yeah.
Draft plan and overview document.
Thank you.
And probably after which you need to put a note, which notes joint work with the government.
Thank you. Late changes there, members, and thank you for picking that up, Councillor Filipaina. I'll just wait to make sure that we do have those words correct from Jacques and Denise's viewpoint.
Just the last, you might also delete the may require.
Delete, yes. All happy, members?
Aye.
Thank you. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Oh, Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment from me, and actually it goes to what Alf has just said around the significance of changes, but it's been broadly addressed. I mean, the speech from the throne, which is a very important document, did state the government will remove Auckland urban growth boundary, or remove the Auckland urban growth boundary and free up density controls, which is a very, very substantial statement to make and potentially definitive in the context of spatial planning and consequential changes to the unitary plan to give effect. So I am grateful for the changes that have been made at F, because if that occurs, that will require a fundamental rethink of this document, and it won't be I mean, you're being incredibly polite today, and you always are, but that will really require a rethink of some of the assumptions that underpin this, because it changes the approach to the way in which Auckland will potentially develop, and there will need to be a recalibration of infrastructure planning right across the council family. So I agree with the changes that are being made to F, but that statement in the speech from the throne is a very substantial statement to make, and will be absolutely imperative to the conclusion of this particular work stream.
Thank you. Councillor Walker again.
Just speaking now, we've finished our questions, Mr. Chair.
I thought we'd finished the speaking as well,
Okay,
but
really just a quick statement on my part, and that's just to reflect again my objection to the environment and cultural heritage together, as compared to separate, so that they have more substance and standing.
thank you. Thank you all, and appreciate your inputs here finally today, and we'll be looking at this again in the new year. I'll put the motions. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Jacques